All right. Well, hello. I am so excited
Hey.
because today I have the opportunity to interview Ede from the Black Carnivore, and she just has such a wealth of information. I've had the opportunity to just listen to many of, the different videos that she puts out, and you can tell that she definitely knows her stuff, but it's just great the way she presents it. So that if for those of us that aren't really heavy into the different scientific and deep terms, she just has a way to just convey the information in just such a simple way where you can understand. So I am really excited for just the wealth of information that I know she'll share with us today. So with all of that said, Ede, I don't know if you want to give like just a quick introduction of yourself and we could just jump right into the interview.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And you were definitely one of the carnivore channels that I checked out in, when I was like getting started and trying to understand like what people eat. And I really appreciated the cooking videos and stuff that you did because I think that that's really the hardest part for so many of us who are getting started. So I thank you for, what you've offered to your community and to the carnivore community as a whole. So, just to give you a little bit more background about myself, I started on the carnivore diet in 2017. December of 2017. Before then, I had followed keto and I actually had lost 80 pounds that way.
Wow.
And I had, a tremendous amount of health improvement on keto, but even more so on carnivore. So it was a delight to see how helpful this way of eating has been for me. And because of that, I wanted to, make sure that this is, that anybody else who is interested in eating this way has someone that they can look to and ask questions of and find community with, and try to ease the barriers of getting into this way of eating, because I won't lie, it's a little different.
Just a little.
So yeah. So having I'm trying to build a community and just a safe place for people to be to kind of get into this way of eating. So that's what I've done, and you can find me on YouTube, on Instagram, and Facebook, all Black Carnivore.
Okay, awesome, awesome. So okay, let's back up a little bit. You said that you had multiple health challenges, right? Can you just tell us a little bit more about those and the ones that have improved since you've started the carnivore diet?
Yeah. So, my main complaints were essentially autoimmune. I have had allergies, eczema, and asthma, pretty much all of my life. I've struggled with them. I used to get like chronic sinus infections and rashes and stuff like that all the time. And, now I understand that those are, autoimmune in nature and all really stem from the same source. But at the time, these were just like random different things that happened to me. And oh gosh, that's too bad.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, so I just was on a litany of over-the-counter medication to kind of deal with the symptoms. And over time, as I got older and also heavier, and perhaps my diet worse, I became more, I just was on more and more medication. When I was a kid, I was born in 71, and so at that time, I think that was sort of the beginning of there being a lot of processed products that were really available. My parents were hippies, so they started me on like a Seventh-day Adventist diet for children, and I had a lot of ground. They used to give me ground almonds with dates, which apparently I loved, and so that started. That began my love of sugar, and there we went. But for the most part, I think I didn't have a lot of like the processed products that we're having today, but I still had my carb addiction. But even when I was born, actually, my mom only, in the last year told me that the doctors told her when I was born that I was allergic to soy. And she was just like, whatever. And I was like, oh my God. So I only, years later, through a lot of testing, discovered I'm allergic to soy and corn. So, which of course is in everything. So when
Absolutely.
yeah. Actually, let me just let me finish that stream of thought. So yes, the allergies was something that I struggled with all of my life, not knowing as a kid that was allergic to soy, or anything else for that matter. And things just got worse as I got older. And by the time I think it was in the early 2000s, my mom had found this naturopathic doctor, and he was both a medical doctor and this naturopathic doctor. So you could get insurance to cover him, but he would give you this alternative sort of perspective. So I went to him and expected him to, like, he was a vegetarian type and all of that, and I fully expected him to be like, okay, you have to go vegan, cut all this and that out. But after the testing, he said, you're allergic to corn and soy. You must cut out everything that comes in a bag or a box, and if a cave woman didn't eat it, you don't eat it. So meat and vegetables. And I was like, okay. I
Wow.
can do that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So is that what caused you to then start keto? Got
Well,
you.
so that was way back, just before paleo really kind of blew up and
Okay.
became on the scene. So that was like 6 months maybe before I first heard about paleo. So I was really strict about it, but I kind of would still go out drinking with friends. I would still have chocolate sometimes, and I just decided at a certain point that I was not going to worry. I was not going to worry about the soy. It was easier to cut out most corn, but the reality is that those products are in everything. I mean, I even had to stop using cornstarch. I had to look at my makeup. I had to look at, my hair products. Like, this stuff is in everything. So it was just too overwhelming and too hard to do it. But at that point, yes, I started, sort of eating what I would call now, lower carb. So I maintained my weight for a while, and then I would have periods where I would eat a lot more, candy and junk, and then my weight would go up. And then, so I went through these cyclical periods where, I was continually gaining a little weight and then losing a little, but not as much as I gained. And so over time, it really started to build up. But after I saw that doctor, that's when I really, started more often eating a lower carb approach. But by 2015, I had gained about 80 pounds, and and I was just exhausted all the time, and it just was overwhelming, and I didn't feel good at all. And so I finally clicked to me that I just need to deal with this. So I'd had success with low carb in the past, and it wasn't the first time I'd heard about it. In the late 90s, I was living in LA, and the fourth iteration of the Atkins book came out, and it was super popular. So, so I did it then too. And, but, at the time, and even when I was doing it, following the doctor's advice, the simple things about eating more salt and keeping your electrolytes up and making sure you're getting enough fat, those things weren't clear. So there were lots of little problems along the way that now in retrospect it was oh man, if I had just used the salt shaker a little more, I would have not had any of those problems. So that was a little that was a bit of a struggle, but this is how it goes. This is why I'm trying to teach other people how to do this more easily. But by by 2015, I really began in earnest. We weren't really using the word keto then, when people were still talking about low carb or Atkins. But I really dove in then and looked for every source I could of information about this way of eating, why it works, how how to do it better and more effectively. On it, and I had a lot of success. I felt a lot of improvement, but I still felt I heard people say, oh, my asthma went away, or, oh, my allergies were completely gone, or, oh, this thing resolved. And I didn't feel full resolution. And in fact, you know, the summer I hit my goal, the summer after I hit my goal weight, I also ran for public office. I've run for public office twice in my community in the first city council. And I didn't win, unfortunately, but did very well. But the second time I ran that summer, you know, I was at my goal weight. But I had a lot of I had a lot of asthma symptoms, which I didn't understand then were asthma. So I was diagnosed later as having allergy-induced asthma. I just thought, you know, throughout my life, like I just had trouble breathing sometimes, or if I got a cold, it would be 6 months before I could breathe again without coughing.
Wow.
Yeah, stuff like that. So, but that summer I had a lot of trouble breathing. I mean, it just became worse and worse. And now in retrospect, I understand it's because I was eating cheese every day. But yeah, so by the end of that, so that was the summer of 2017. By December of 2017, I decided to give it a try, you know, doing the carnivore diet. And I had found someone who was talking about the beef and butter fast. And that's basically where you eat butter and ground beef for 3 days straight. And that's it. So I did that. And like by day 2, I was like, oh my God, this is how I'm eating the rest of my life. This is awesome. And I think I stayed on that beef and butter thing for like 2 weeks. Like you know, it was like all of a sudden I could breathe. Now in retrospect, I was not eating dairy and I was eating plenty of fat and getting all the red meat. And, you know, that was it. So, but following that, like you know, this is still such an experimental road. You know, I wasn't given, I didn't have all the information, and I don't know that anybody has all the information. So I didn't really understand at the time that dairy really is a problem for me, and I cannot have it. So after the beef and butter thing, I went back to having cheese and incorporating cheese, and you know, it didn't bother my stomach, so I assumed, well, you know, it's fine. But it, you know, it does. It bothers a different part of me. It just, you know, yeah.
So I think you bring out a lot of great points because, you know, they said, hey, you have this first doctor told you that you had an allergy to soy and corn and you cut it out. So the assumption is, okay, I should be good all across the board. And then you end up consuming something that is technically considered as carnivore, right? With the dairy, but your problem still continued. And I think that's such an interesting point and something that we really need to pay attention to. Just because something is, if you're following the carnivore diet and you're noticing that you're eating something that's technically carnivore, but your body is telling you, I don't like this. This is not working out for us, that you can't just be so stubborn and dug in and hold on to eating it. Because while it may be okay for someone else, it may not work for you. So, you know, when you cut out, well, let me just ask this. How long did it take you to notice a difference after eliminating the dairy?
So I had intended to like give it up for 30 days. And I think I was maybe 10 days in, it might not even have been 10 days, when I was out with my mom and, you know, I was really hungry and she had a bag of those wisps, you know, those little crackers, right? So I had 3 of them. And within an hour, I was feeling like I needed my inhaler. So
wow.
But like, I don't know at what point I started feeling better. Cause you know, like, you know, the descent from feeling great to feeling horrible is really quick, but the ascent from feeling horrible to feeling great is gradual. So it could have been 3 days that I didn't, you know, need my inhaler. I just didn't notice or wasn't thinking about it. But it was like day 10 that happened. And, you know, and then it was like, wow, that was so clear. So I didn't, of course, want to believe it. You know, so I was like, let me test this thing. And, you know, and I had some very, you know, fine, fancy cheese. And, you know, so I tested it off and on 4 times. And each and every time, you know, within hours, I needed to use my inhaler. So, you know, it was clear. And the fourth time, like I had eaten it for dinner, and then I woke up. I guess shortly after, or sometime after going to bed, I had dreamt that I needed my inhaler, and I woke up and I needed my inhaler, and I was like, okay, so this is becoming dangerous.
Wow.
As an adult, my job is to keep myself alive, and if I'm doing something that is causing me, this much harm, that like my brain is like, hey, get up, you need to
Yeah.
do something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's when I was like, okay, that's it. So it's over. The
So
love
you
affair
just
is
went
over.
cold turkey from that point and just stopped eating cheese. And how long has it been?
Let's see. I think that was like in April of 2018.
And you haven't
No,
had
May of 2018.
dairy since.
Mm. Yeah,
And
not once. I even stopped eating like those pork rinds that have jalapeno cheddar. Like I don't eat anything that has any dairy. Now maybe that's overkill, I don't know. And I think this is a question, like a lot of people feel like, well, it's just a little bit doesn't bother me. But my feeling is, if a lot bothers you, a little bothers you. It maybe is a smaller response, but who's to say it's not cumulative? Who's to say it's not? And as I said, that there's you can have this slow and steady ascent and decline, when you're having these small little bits and pieces of something. So you might not notice that you're feeling worse. And I decided, like, being able to breathe is so important. And
just a little.
something that I've yeah and something I've had problems with all my life. And
Yeah.
so once that like resolved, the postnasal drip, all of the sinus infections, and all of it, once that resolved, it was like, I just don't want to do that ever again.
Mhm.
So, and I put up a post actually on Instagram, like, I don't know, maybe a month ago. And when I went carnivore, like I don't know, I needed more space in my kitchen. And so I moved all of my like supplements and prescriptions and everything all to the upper shelf. And then, I just never went up there again. And then I went up to the upper shelf because I needed some more room. And I was like looking through, and all of these things were expired. I mean, stuff that I used to use all the time. And
Mhm.
it was all gone. And, even when I went keto, like I used Flonase for years, not knowing that it was a steroid. I just thought, oh, this really helps me with my nose and stuff and my allergies. I was allergic to dogs, which I grew up with dogs, and I have one now, and my mom's always had dogs. So that was like a real problem. That's all gone. That's no longer a problem. I lost my sense of smell for a long time living with a dog. So, now I can smell things, very subtle things, which it's like, wow, when people say, stop and smell the roses, like I truly appreciate that, because I
Wow.
couldn't for a while, quite a
Wow.
while. Yeah, there are all of these other things. Like when I talk about, the autoimmune stuff, that's sort of the focus, but there's all of these other smaller things that like go with it that you don't even really think about. I think about the money that I spent on Flonase, on Claritin, on Benadryl, which I took around the clock for weeks at a time, when I would have like an allergic reaction. Like with corn, if I eat corn, I basically get a rash from head to toe for weeks on end. That takes a tremendous amount of steroid cream to like deal with, and Benadryl around the clock. So, like my friends would like to go to a Mexican restaurant. And so I would have, I would count out in my head, like I could have 6 tortilla chips, and I knew that that would give me a rash up and down one thigh. And so it was like, okay, like I'll do that. But now, I'm like, clearly, that's a problem.
It's not worth it.
So yeah, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
So I'm really, really, I'm a lot more strict now. And also having a way of eating that allows you to be full and satisfied, and not kind of, hash your brain about what's, what stuff that you're eating has made it a lot easier. Because when you're keto, there's too many products to be trying to like figure out what's got corn or soy in it. I know without a doubt that steak and generally hamburger and other things don't have corn or soy in them. Now, I have thought about, does it matter what the animal is being fed, and is that translating itself to me? You know, that's something I don't have as much control over. I do, you know, I've eaten grass-fed, grass-finished meat. I'm not sure that I see a difference when it comes to ruminant animals. I think that ruminant animals have a way of processing food that changes, that allows them to produce quality fat and meat that isn't a problem, even if they are eating corn and soy.
Okay, so let
Mhm.
me just stop you right there. For those that are listening who may not be aware of all the terms that you're throwing around, ruminant, can you define that for people who may, you know, just they're exploring this way of eating?
Mhm. Yeah, there are certain animals that have a way of digesting food that, well, they have a rumen, it's like an organ or something, and they have four stomachs, and the food is basically digested by bacteria that live in those stomachs. And so it's a very specific way of digesting food. So cows, bison, elk, deer, goats, sheep, those are all ruminant animals. So if you're eating lamb, you know, goat, hamburger, you know, from a beef, from a cow, those are all sources of what we call red meat. Then there's pork and chicken and fish, which are, I guess they're monogastric. They have one stomach. And so the way they produce fat and meat is different, and it is more vulnerable to creating, well, uh, so let me say that the food that they are fed has a much greater impact on the fat that they lay down in their bodies. So when you eat a cow, I mean, when you eat a pig or a chicken that's been fed corn or soy, I do think that that can have a bigger impact on your physical body, and especially if you have, you know, an issue with corn or soy. So I do eat pork, but I'm more limited about it. I tend to have bad reactions to bacon. So, you know, one or two slices, like, I don't really see a reaction, but you know, when you're eating it in the quantities that carnivores often do, I do see a reaction.
Does it
Same with
matter
like pork rinds.
do you think it matters the quality of pork?
So yes, I do. So if you get like pastured pork, or you know, some of those heritage porks, or pork that is raised in a different country, I think you will see a better quality, and you won't see as much of an impact. But you know, even with pastured, like, you know, I think people in the world, well, people in America consider vegetarian fed to be a plus. So if you're going to places that are giving you pastured pork, or you know, chickens that are, you know, that roam free, they are still being fed corn and soy feed, because that's considered a good thing.
Okay.
So it's you know, I think probably if I could find somebody who is raising these animals on their natural diet, and you know, chickens are carnivorous, that's what they eat, bugs and, you know, stuff, and they eat meat as well. um and you know, and I think that you know, pigs are omnivorous, and but you know, they get out there and they eat a lot too, of a variety of different things. So if those animals were eating, you know, something that is closer to their natural diet, perhaps I wouldn't have as much of a reaction. But I don't know where to find that. You know, it's not accessible. So
It's
I, you know, yeah. So I think, so for me specifically, I don't know that this is necessarily true for everybody, but I do feel like, you know, but here is an example again where I do eat eggs. I have had reactions to eggs. I've gone many years of my life not eating them because they made me nauseous. So I kind of go in and out and kind of check to see if I can eat them again. And then there'll be years where I can eat them, and then years again when I can't. So right now I seem to be in a stage where I can eat them. I don't eat them all the time. I try to eat them, pretty infrequently so as to have little exposure. But yeah, I mean, this is something where perhaps I would probably do ideally best on red meat only. But I, throw in some eggs sometimes. Bacon, I'm a little more cautious, but I do throw that in. Fresh pork is less of a problem than bacon, and I think that might have to do with the histamines. And so, again, that's probably, I don't know, that might be a word that people are unfamiliar with, but basically, the longer meat lives, the more it begins to decay. And how much of that decay we can handle is, it varies from person to person, and also varies, I think, based off your own health. And so you can, so for some people, they just can't eat meat that is older. Uh, and I think that might be part of what my issue is with bacon, especially poor quality bacon. Some of the bacon that's a little better quality, I seem to do better, but it costs like $1 million. I mean, here in New York, if I get some of that high quality bacon, I'm talking about $12 for like, half a pound.
Two
So
pieces.
Like, yeah, right. So
I'll pass on the bacon, right?
Yeah,
I get it.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So quick question for you. So again, I'm just thinking about somebody who, they're just hearing the word histamine and understanding what that is. How do you know that there is like a histamine response? Like what are some of the signs?
Well, I think it differs. It can differ for a lot of people, but I think about histamines like, we use antihistamines to, stop allergic reactions. Well, whatever that allergic reaction is for you, that's what it's going to be. So, when I have an allergic reaction, my nose is running, I get, really itchy, the back of my throat itches, my eyes start itching. I want to blow my nose. I get a lot more congested. I swell, my fingers get swollen. My skin starts getting irritated everywhere. So those are the things, the signs that, I see. So I eat the bacon, I wake up the next morning and my fingers are like sausages and my skin is all tight and it's very painful.
So that's a good way to take note. And again,
then the solution is also the same. So that is this instance where taking Benadryl would be helpful. Now that's obviously not a long-term solution. You don't want to do that all the time, but I mean, you want to use medicine appropriately when it is necessary and know that you don't do that again.
Yeah. I think, again, what you're sharing is just another example of something that is technically carnivore, but if your body is responding in the wrong way, that you have to be wise and not just, hold on to this, okay, I'm going to eat it regardless, and ignore the signs that your body, are clearly showing you that this is not good for us. I want to back up really quickly. You mentioned that obviously you have a huge response to dairy, but I noticed in some of your videos that you use ghee. Can you, first of all, explain what ghee is and just the distinction? Because a lot of people are like, well, isn't that considered dairy? And even eggs, some people would consider eggs as falling in the dairy category. So can you speak to that?
Yeah. Well, the dairy and egg thing, I mean, that's just the way that we have been taught, like my plate, dairy and eggs, but, eggs are like from a chicken. Sorry about that.
No problem. So, we keep on talking.
No.
Yeah, we could hear you.
So eggs are from a chicken and dairy is, milk from a cow. So or some animal. So those things are different. They're not the same. But and an egg is a little baby chicken. Milk is what's fed to the little baby animal. So those things are different, even though they're lumped together. So butter I consider to that can be in a gray zone. I generally make ghee, which is essentially clarified butter. So you're slowly simmering the butter so that the fat in the butter separates from the milk proteins that are left. And when you think about when you get I guess when they milk the cows, the liquid that comes out is, water, it's fat, and it's like lactose, which is like the sugar that's in milk that makes it sweet. And so as it is, it separates there's the milk part, then there's the heavy cream part, and then the heavy cream is then further processed to create butter, and so butter has the least amount of water and lactose in it, whereas milk, the part you might drink, is has the most. So butter has the least amount of the milk proteins and the lactose that can be irritating for people, but it can still potentially cause a problem for people. So there's the further step of refining it further by simmering it and separating out those milk proteins and lactose. And then when it's finished, I strain it through like a cheesecloth or a paper towel, and then the resulting liquid that's left in the bowl is just fat. It came from the milk of a cow, but you have now removed 90% of the milk proteins and so on. So when you make it, you'll see that there's all of the stuff that kind of looks like, you can see it, like let's say you make toast and you toast the butter, like that's what turns brown when you're toasting it. The milk proteins getting toasted, and that's what people think tastes so good. Although the first time I made ghee, I was kind of like, oh, look at all this stuff that's coming out. I wonder if it's am I missing out on something good? And I tasted it, and it tasted like milk that's been left out on the counter like 6 weeks. I mean, it was not good. So I was like, nope, I'm not missing anything. So that's what coming out. Now there are some people who say that they're so sensitive that is a problem. So, you have to test that for yourself. I feel like I've tested ghee and I've felt like I'm okay with it. But again, that's another thing where I try to be limited in how often I'm exposing myself to it. But, it's good. So sometimes
Delicious.
I go overboard. Yeah.
Yeah. But you're not having a response, and you don't need to take out the inhaler when you're using the ghee. So
that's right.
Yeah,
but that's not to say I'm not having a response. So, and that was the point that I was, trying to get across before, is that, one, you have to be broader in your perspective of what is a response. When it came to dairy, like I'd heard about lactose intolerance. So my conception of what a response to dairy had to do with the digestive system. It did not, it wasn't broad enough to think about, my allergies, my asthma, my eczema, all of that other stuff. So I think you have to be broader in thinking about whether you're having a reaction to the food, and kind of run down from head to toe. Because the thing that most carnivores, I think, discover when they start doing this is, your mood, it changes. You have less irritability. You have more energy. There's no brain fog. Depression may go away. You may find skin improvements. Your health markers that your doctor follows, those things improve. Your digestion improves. Things like heartburn improves. Things like gout improve. So there may be a whole gamut of things that you may not connect to the dairy or an autoimmune response. And so I encourage you to sort of think more broadly about, what's going on with your body and what things you're noticing. And so it could be that, some people get acne from dairy. That's not something that's happened to me, but that doesn't mean that dairy isn't a problem. It just means, my weak spot is something else. And I think, we all already kind of know what our weak spots are. When you get sick repeatedly through life, like, this is kind of the same things happen, you know. So you know where your weak points are, and so those are places to look. But there, you know, but there are maybe secondary weak points and other stuff like that. But acne was just not something I ever really had, so it's not showing up there.
Okay. So you mentioned something about, switching to carnivore and how, your markers change in terms of even with your blood work. One of the things, and I have a friend who has a friend who was doing keto and she was having great success, but she went in and her doctor was really concerned because of her cholesterol numbers. Can you speak to that? Because that seems to be a common thing and just even some of the misconception that's out there.
Yeah, that's super frustrating. And I just talked to a friend of mine too, who was like doing keto and she lost 50 pounds and then went to the doctor and her, cholesterol was through the roof. So she decided to stop doing it, decided it was unhealthy. And I'm like, okay. But I was like, I wish you had spoken to me, but, I mean, of course, and I have to give a disclaimer, I'm not a doctor. So anything I say cannot serve as medical advice. But the readings and the research that I've done have suggested that, the connection between cholesterol, your cholesterol number and your risk of death is, it's not there. And those things have been tied, but in fact, they're not there. So it's not clear that cholesterol is as bad for us as has been said. But also not everybody, you do get a higher cholesterol when you're eating this way. I mean, the reality is that we are living on, on fat. That's what's energizing our bodies. So there's a lot of fat in our, system that is just flowing around and doing all the work that it needs to do. And that's how, that's how fat travels around with cholesterol. It's kind of like a, delivery system. So you're just going to see a lot more cholesterol in the system. In addition to that, as you're losing weight, you can just have a very high cholesterol number and it may come down, and it often does come down after you've been weight stable for a while. But like if you go to get your cholesterol checked while you're losing weight, and especially when you lose over 30 pounds, I think the number is that you really start to see these fluctuations in the number, and the cholesterol numbers are very volatile in of themselves. So what you eat on at any point has actually a very big impact on what the number turns out to be. So if you go, I think Dave Feldman has done a lot of really great research to kind of explode the myths around cholesterol and cholesterol numbers. But he also came up with a protocol that can drive your numbers down by like 100 points. I mean, it's not insignificant. And he did this for people who maybe need to have like certain numbers, for their insurance purposes and stuff like that. And so, I would encourage you, if you're really concerned about the numbers and you really need the numbers to be in a certain place, to go check out his website and do the protocol. I mean, it's basically a certain amount of fasting and a certain amount of eating afterwards, and high fat eating in order to, to get the effect that is desired. So I don't worry about cholesterol. I think that there are other numbers that are better, that are more indicative of what's going on in your body. So you want to look at your triglycerides. If your triglycerides are very high, that's an indication that you're eating carbs. So once those numbers get down very low, that's a good sign. When your HDL gets up higher, that is also a good sign. And you want to make sure those numbers are improved. You want to make sure, I mean, using the guide about metabolic syndrome is really helpful. Like when you can reverse the 5 markers of metabolic syndrome, that will do you far better in terms of preventing or reversing disease than anything else, than worrying about a particular cholesterol number. So those the 5 signs of metabolic syndrome, and I never remember remember all of them, but I'm going to try now, is abdominal obesity. You want a low HDL, high blood pressure, high blood glucose, and the fifth one is I don't know. I can't remember now. I have something up on my Instagram channel where I kind of walk through that. So yeah. So anyway, those, yeah. So if you want to pay attention to those markers, and the cholesterol is not the most important marker.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so I think you mentioned some things that would be like a great transition into this high fat or high protein way of doing carnivore. And I have a little guest that just came in. Good morning. All right, so we may have, all right, never mind.
Hi.
Good morning. All right, this is Faith. She just tracks me down wherever I am. All right, so do you do more of a high fat or high protein way of doing carnivore? And do you think that one is better than the other, or do you think it just matters on the individual?
So I do higher fat. As I started playing around with carnivore, I kind of swung between the extremes to try to, to see which one was better and try to understand. And early on in my carnivore journey, I was experimenting with like a protein sparing modified fast, which is where you eat, just really, really lean, and you eat the exact amount of protein that you need and really lean, no fat. And this is a way to, to lose weight. And I noticed, I was doing it for about 3 weeks, and I noticed, I didn't even notice during the process, but at about 3 weeks in, somehow I had gotten some beef short ribs. So I made those, and those are, super fatty, and I ate them. And within 20 minutes, it was like, the heavens opened and angels were singing. Like, I felt a joy that, was not related to anything. I mean, nothing had changed between 20 minutes ago and then, and then that moment. But it was like, I think it was the fat hit my brain, and it was like, oh, and I realized I had become increasingly depressed and just irritable over that 3-week period. But I didn't notice it because, again, it was like a slow decline. But yeah, I had become less and less happy. And then I realized it was the fat. And so I ate the short ribs the next day and had the same reaction. So I don't know how long it takes to kind of, I mean, I think it takes maybe it takes a couple of meals to like top up your fat, and then you're kind of good again. So I don't get that, joyousness every time I eat short ribs, although I do enjoy them. But, of course, I think that there is a balance, and how much fat every person needs at any given moment varies. So, I ate a lot of fat then, and I think I really needed it then. It doesn't mean that I need that same exact amount all along the way. And I think that you have to be, I know that we have been taught to count calories and to be very restrictive and to do what we have been told by a magazine, a doctor, a book, wherever. But at the end of the day, your body is king, your body, or queen for us. Your body makes the decision about what it needs at any given moment, and it's good at it. I mean, there's no need to get, someone else's input. Your body's very clear. But, when you have the noise of all the carbs and all the other stuff, you can't really discern those signals. But once you remove that, it is very clear. You have a craving for what your body wants, and you fulfill it, and then the craving goes away. Mm-hmm. So I hesitate to say to people, eat 80% of your calories as fat, or 90%, or 60%. I say, listen to what your body is craving. And if you look at a short rib and your mouth starts watering, maybe you need something fattier. If you look at, a New York strip and prefer that, maybe you don't need as much fat. It's kind of up to you. And it's going to vary too, based off of what you did. If you had a very active day and you didn't eat much and you went all day without eating, the next day you might find that you're, taking some bites of butter while you wait for dinner to make. So, that'll happen, but then the next day you won't have a desire to do that. So I think you really have to listen and pay attention. But I would say for people who are trying to heal specific things, you may need to have a lot higher fat for a while. Fat is obviously hugely important for the brain. And I don't think that that's given enough credence. And especially for women who have done a lot of restriction for a long time, they're going to need a lot of fat if there's any kind of mood or brain things going on. So, I have worked with people who have, done that and eaten a lot more fat and seen a tremendous improvement in mood, in ability to concentrate, in healing from brain injury. So,
from consuming more fat. Yeah. So what I hear you saying is, don't get locked into a specific formula. Just listen to your body. And I feel like that's really been one of the biggest benefits of carnivore for me, is I feel like I'm so in tune with my body. I don't think I've ever been as in tune with my body as I am now. Like you say, one day I may desire something where I'll just wake up, even with liver, like it happened last week, where I was just like, man, just really craving it. And I know to a lot of people, they're like, yeah, my body never spoke that one to me. But, I could tell whatever was in there, I needed it. I definitely think that it is good not to get locked into a formula, but just really going according to what your body is telling you. So you're saying, so let's stay on this topic of fat. What do you just choose to get fattier cuts of meat, or do you add additional fat to the meats that you cook, or is it both? And with that question, can you talk a little bit about suet, because that seems to be the thing that everyone tends to lean towards? And I'll ask the other part after you answer this.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great question. And I don't think that people really realize how processed oil is. So a lot of times, even in the keto realm, we're talking about, yes, let's have unprocessed foods, let's have whole foods, but somehow that doesn't make it to fat. And so you have these beautiful array of pictures of, salmon and, beef and, steaks and beautiful vegetables and things, and a bottle of olive oil. But it's like, that is actually super, super processed, and it's not great. And so I really do encourage people to choose fatty choices of meat, because then you're getting the freshest of fat. And
such as just examples.
The fattier places on the cow is my favorite. Of course, the ribeye is supremely fatty and marbled. If you can get it, or it's expensive, so that's not my regular go-to. Chuck roast is usually very fatty. Brisket also very fatty, especially when it's untrimmed. So try to get that. Oxtails, super, super fatty and utterly delicious. So
agreed.
Get it. Any rib of any animal, the belly is the fattest part of most animals. So if you can get salmon belly, also delicious. Any ribs is delicious. Pork belly, it's just about all fat, and that's where bacon is made from, usually pork belly, but also from the jowl. Apparently the cheeks are very fatty too. So that's another part. The brain is also very fatty. Bone marrow is all fat. So if you can get a bone that has been get sliced canoe cut, so it's long like a canoe, you can get the the marrow out of that, and that is delicious. So for
Absolutely.
people who, yeah, and bone marrow is an organ. So fat is also an organ. So a lot of times you hear people say, we must eat organ meat, we must eat organ meat. Well, you know, fat is an organ. So even if you can't get yourself to eat, you know, liver, you know, brains, or heart or kidney or any of that stuff, if you're eating fat, whole fat, you're eating an organ. So you can feel calm, you know, and assuaged there. But I will say bone marrow is an organ, and it is, you know, in my opinion, one of the most delicious. So if you can roast it in the oven for like 20 minutes, the top gets all crispy, especially when you put salt on top. It's all crispy like creme brulee, and the inside is like pudding, and it tastes like butter, beef butter. I mean,
It's
it's just good.
delicious. It really
Yeah,
is.
yeah. So it's definitely one of the most accessible meats, and tasty meats. Those are all great options for fatty cuts. And then you know, you just gotta look for things that look fatty. So don't look for the red steak. You know, you want it to look white or you know, yellow. Well, apparently grass-fed meat, the fat is more yellowish versus white. But you know, you're looking for that, the fat, more than the red, and that'll get you there. And you know, in terms of like expense, like, you know, this is always a balance, and you know, I'm always thinking about how much I want to spend versus you know, what I can get. So I find the chuck roast is the most affordable way to get the highest fat meat. You know, even if you're going to Whole Foods, even, it's usually somewhere between $7.99 and you know, $8.99 a pound, which you know is better than most. And you're able to get the whole roast if you want that. If you're getting ground beef, usually ground beef is made from chuck roast, you know, but not necessarily always. And so you want to make sure you're getting the 80/20, or if you find it 27/30/73, you know, fat to lean, that will give you the kind of fat that you're looking for. And when I make ground beef, I do tell people, don't manipulate it so much, because the more you do that, you're compressing the meat and not leaving like air and space between like the meat. And so when that happens, as you cook it and the fat renders out, it doesn't have a way of staying inside the burger. It just renders into the pan, so it becomes very dry. So I tell people, when you're making your patties, just pat, you're done. You know, don't like do a whole lot.
Did you hear that, Faith? Faith is one of our cooks here, and she helps sometimes. I'll sit you up. Can you tell her again about the pat? Because Faith does a lot of this when she's cooking burgers for us.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes we feel like we want to make that perfect circle, but you know, that at the expense of that is that it becomes very dry, because you're compressing all that meat every time you do that. So I really try to, like, you know, just sort of grab a chunk and go pat, you know, pat, and then that's it, and then put it in the pan.
Yeah, well, I'm calling Faith out, but I'm just as guilty. So thank you for that point. You learn something new every day for sure. Okay, so now I do know that there's some that say, you know, the rendered fat, that it can have an issue. Some people have an issue with that. Mm-hmm. And they recommend just kind of doing raw suet. Have you found that you've had issues with rendered fat?
So I think in the beginning, it was harder on my stomach than it is now. So I think every body has a range of how much fat they can tolerate at any one time or in a given day, and how much they can tolerate in liquid form versus solid form. Mm-hmm. So I think I have evolved to the point where it actually doesn't bother me. And, you know, when I make the ground beef crumbles, you know, where it's not a hamburger, but it's just like the ground beef I've cooked in a pan, I pour all of it, including the rendered fat, into the bowl, and I can eat it hot, and it's not a problem. So I thought everybody could do that. But once I started talking to some of the other Black Carnivores, it's like, oh, I guess not. Yeah. So some people need to eat it cold, and then it's okay. I think when it's liquid, you know, it just moves through your digestive system really quickly, and so it forces, you know, your colon to absorb, to draw water into it, which is what, you know, creates the diarrhea that people often have. So you just kind of have to figure out where your limit is, and it may change over time too. The more you eat, the more your body's like, oh, okay, we're doing the high fat thing, got it. But so there is always going to be, I mean, there's always going to be a limit for every person. What that is going to differ from person to person. So some of our group have to eat very, very lean and find, you know, even salmon, something I find to be pretty lean, to be too fatty. So it varies from person to person. And but that is also something where you might want to experiment with HCl tablets and ox bile. There have been, you know, some of our group who've experimented with those to help them in their ability to digest fats. Well, ox bile is specifically for digesting fats. So and then there are people who've like had their gallbladder removed, which means they really can't deal with a whole lot of fat at one time. But, you know, the body does adjust. And so, you know, it just may mean they're one of the people that can't do a one meal a day. You know, they're going to have to eat their fat, you know, in smaller portions throughout the day, which is fine. There's no reason why you have to, you know, do it that way. So, you know, so I do think it's better to eat the whole piece of fat, because the fat itself, it has, you know, like I said, it's an organ. So when you're eating suet, you know, you're getting collagen, you're getting all the stuff that is in the fat that's holding it together, not just the liquid that has rendered out. So that's why I do recommend that you eat like fatty sources of meat, because you're getting all of that was in the fat, not just the liquid fat that has rendered out. You know, butter is I mean, or ghee, as I described it, is actually very refined. You know, it's a very refined product. So I would not recommend that you get that be the bulk of your fat in a day. I think that's also why people get in trouble on keto is, well, one, this focus on macros drives you to create weird diets, because you can't get perfect macros unless you're measuring things. And the easiest way to measure things is to have, you know, something that is wholly lean and something that is wholly fat, and bring them together to get the exact number that you're looking for. But you know, that leads you to essentially having a protein shake with MCT oil added, rather than eating, you know, a piece of chuck roast, where, you know, the actual piece of meat on your plate, you know, nobody knows like what that is. You know, you can't look that up in MyFitnessPal. All of that is just an approximation. Yeah. So that's why I discourage people from counting macros at all. I think it's not helpful, and you know, I can do this the rest of your life, you know, but eating a whole piece of fat that's attached to a piece of meat will get you all the things that you're looking for. Now, that's not to say that, you know, adding ghee or adding butter is bad. You just don't want that to be the basis of all the fat that you get. And I think the quality of fat that you eat really does matter. And I have definitely noticed a difference. So if I'm trying to make, you know, olive oil and butter like my basis, I do not do well at all. You know, I do a lot better when I am eating the fat, that saturated fat that comes from a cow as my base, and then those other things just sort of, you know, serve as an accent.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Wow, excellent point. So you mentioned two things that can help with those that may have an issue with fat. Can you repeat those two things and where people can get it? And before you mention it, I think you said something that is key, that while you may not be able to tolerate eating a lot of fat right now, which was the case for you, it doesn't mean that that's always going to be the case, right? So to not become discouraged if that's the case, but, you know, try little by little, increasing the increment, and not, if you're finding that you're struggling now, to not say, oh, you know, this YouTuber said this, or this YouTuber said that I have to have this percentage of fat, and then you consume all of this and your system is like, whoa, we can't handle it. So I think sometimes
Right.
we have this mindset of all or nothing. And
Yeah.
again, we ignore listening to our body. So I think that, you know, your testimony is great that, hey, I couldn't initially, but with time, I was able to build on that. So if you could just
Yeah.
mention the two things that, you know, can help with
Mhm.
those that may be having an issue and where you can get it.
Well, I did a live stream where I kind of walked through some information. I created slides that, you know, I share with people. It's just 3 slides or 4 slides to make it clear like how to get started on the carnivore diet. And one of the slides was showing common problems and solutions. So the most often the things that I see people having a problem with are um, you know, have to do with electrolytes, have to do with not eating enough. And then the third thing has to do with digestion and was hydrochloric acid, making sure that you have enough. So the hydrochloric acid that's the acid that's in our stomach that digests food. When you eat a lot of carbs, I always get this wrong, but it makes your stomach less acidic, which means that when you eat certain foods that require more acidity to digest, it's not there, and so you're going to have a hard time digesting that food. So protein, you know, you require quite a bit of hydrochloric acid to digest, and so that's why in the beginning, you know, a lot of times people are like, okay, I'm going to do the carnivore diet. I'm going to, you know, eat 1 meal a day. I'm going to get, you know, 80% of my calories from fat. And so they sit down and have, you know, 2 pounds of like chuck roast plus, you know, butter on top of it. And then, you know, it's an explosive situation. Because their, you know, their bodies are just not able to digest that. So what we recommend is before you start taking pills, the first thing to do is just eat smaller meals. You know, have three smaller meals throughout the day instead of trying to do it all at once. Don't drink water when you during either 30 minutes before, during a meal, or 30 minutes after the meal, because the water is just going to dilute the acid that you need to digest the food. And don't eat so much rendered fat because, you know, that's still hard to digest. So you can do those 3 behavioral things. If that's not getting you the relief you need, you know, within a day or two, then turn to, you know, taking the HCl pills for a little bit. And I gave a protocol in that video for how to, you know, how to go about doing that. And usually, you know, that resolves most of the problems for people. Ox bile is something a little bit different, and that's specifically to assist in digesting fats. But a lot of times, just doing those behavioral things first will resolve the fat thing first. So I recommend people go to that before they go getting the ox biles. And then that's something that I would recommend, like talking to someone. You know, I do coaching, so that would be a place where, you know, you could like work with someone to experiment with it and kind of figure it out instead of just kind of, you know, giving it a try. I don't want to give a blanket recommendation for how you implement the ox biles.
Okay.
So yeah, but and of course you can get this stuff at, you know, Amazon. I have an Amazon store. It's you know, the Black Carnivore Amazon store, but you can get it anywhere. HCl tablets are, I don't know, maybe $10 for a bunch, for a bottle. So it's not expensive, not hard to get.
Okay. Well, I think that all the things that you just mentioned are just really great recommendations. And the video that you did, I'll definitely try to link that in the
Okay.
description of this video so
Yeah.
that people can do it. And if they are interested in receiving some coaching from you, can you tell us where they can find
Yeah.
you?
So I don't have a website up yet. I just, in my videos, I have and also on my Instagram channel in the bio, I have a link where you can, you know, just reach out to me for, to schedule an appointment, but you can also just reach out to me and in a DM and on Instagram, you know, just inquire further if you have more questions and want to see if it's right for you. So that's, you know, that's what I'm happy to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll leave all of that information, your Instagram, your YouTube information in the description box as well.
Yeah.
Because like I said, a lot of great information on your YouTube channel. And yeah, I don't know if you had anything else that, oh, you know what, before we wrap up, I do want you to speak really quickly because that seems to be one of the biggest things for people is when they first transition to the carnivore diet, just having very low energy. And some people, they end up getting discouraged and saying, okay, this is not really working for me. So can you speak to like electrolytes, and do you use just salt, or do you have something that's pre-mixed? Can you just speak to that really quickly?
Yeah, that's, you know, one of the main complaints that we see, and that's what I had on my slide where I talk about the common problems and solutions. And I think, yeah, not having enough electrolytes will absolutely cause that feeling of fatigue and shakiness and weakness. And so I recommend people salt your food heavily. Don't, you know, this is not the time to restrict. You don't want to do that. And I think that people often don't understand that, you know, we've been told a lot about salt, and, you know, perhaps in the context of a carbohydrate diet, you know, a lot of salt is going to cause bloating, but it will not do that on a carnivore diet or even a keto diet. And you can make yourself very sick without enough salt. So you really can't restrict in the same way. People who are, you know, I mean, but there are people who are on high blood pressure medication that are on salt pills, water pills, not salt pills, water pills. So, you know, that population has to be very careful, and they are going to have to talk to their doctors about, you know, titrating down their medication and dealing with their symptoms. And maybe, I think we're all supposed to be checking our blood pressure at home, and nobody does, but, you know, you need to. So so that's one population that has to be careful, and that salt is one of the things that could cause that feeling of fatigue. And then the other problem is not eating enough. I see that all the time. You know, there's I mean, one, there's an interest in fasting way too soon before people are really ready to do it. But two, you know, we've been told, like, to lose weight, you got to be hungry, you got to restrict, and you got to, you know, be uncomfortable. And so we kind of go into it like that, but you can't, like, you have to eat, because the food is, you know, it's fuel. That's what we're doing. We're eating fat, and it's serving as our fuel. So if you are not doing that, you're going to feel worse. But there is just going to be a period of transition where your body is going from burning sugar for energy to burning fat. And so I do try to tell people, it is very common to feel tired because you're having a fuel crisis. You're switching over from you know, sugar burning to fat burning, and that is a huge change, and it is a global change in your body. So, you know, your body's like been running one way for, you know, 40, 50, 60 years. Like, it's, you know, it's going to take 2 weeks to flip over, you know, and it's still not going to be good even then. It's going to take, you know, it may take up to 6 weeks, 8 weeks before your body is like great at burning fat. But you're going to feel improvement in, you know, your energy level, but it's not going to be like through the roof until, you know, maybe 6 or 8 weeks. But that's okay. You know, even feeling a little better is important.
Awesome.
And it will happen.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, wow.
Yeah.
You gave us a lot of great information, and I really appreciate you taking the time to just be here. And like I said, I'll link all of her information in the description box, and I strongly encourage you to just, you know, check out her YouTube channel. And if you are on Instagram, you can also check out her page. But again, thank you. I don't know if you have any final thoughts or anything that you'd like to add.
Well, just thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'd love to get an opportunity to talk to your, you know, your audience, and to get a chance to talk to you. Thank you for the work that you do. And, you know, I just hope that we can elevate and have more people amplifying this message, so that our community hears this as an option. And, you know, we don't just have to have so many needless, you know, illnesses and death because of food that that just shouldn't happen. So thank
Absolutely.
you for your work. And I look forward to being a partner, and let's be, I'm happy to help however I can.
Okay. Well, I will say you were extremely helpful today. Extremely helpful. So thank you again.
Okay, no problem. All right.